can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sand. And right now, I feel like 100 grand.
You are listening to Inspired Insider with your host, Dr. Jeremy Wise.
Dr. Jeremy Weiss here, founder of InspiredInsider.com, where I talk with inspirational entrepreneurs and leaders. Today is no different. I have Ben Hagon, who is the founder of For Good Intent. And Ben, before I formally introduce you, I always like to point out other episodes people should check out. Since this is part of the Top Agency series, I had Jason Swank on. Jason Swank had a really interesting journey. He built his agency up to over 8 figures, then sold it, and then recently he's been buying up agencies. He also has an agency group. So he has kind of shared his journey, the landscape and everything like that. And also Todd Taskey, he has the Second Bite podcast. So he actually pairs agencies with private equity and helps sell agencies. He calls it the Second Bite because sometimes when they're working with private equity, they make more off the second bite than they do on the first. So he also talks about the valuation, the landscape of agencies, and many more. So you can check out other episodes on InspiredInsider.com. This episode is brought to you by Rise 25. The Rise 25, we help businesses give to and connect to their Dream 100 relationships. And how do we do that? We do that by helping you run your podcast. We're an easy button for a company to launch and run a podcast. We do the strategy, the accountability, and the full execution. Ben, we call ourselves the magic elves that work in the background to make it look easy for the host and the company so they can create great relationships, great content, and run their business. So, for me, the number one thing in my life is relationships. I'm always looking at ways to give to my best relationships. And I found no better way over the past decade to profile the people and companies I most admire on this planet and share with the world what they're working on. So if you thought about podcasting, you should. If you have questions, you can go to rise25.com. I have lots of free content actually on Inspired Insider as well. So I'm excited to introduce Ben Hagon. He's founder of For Good Intent. You can check it out, forgoodintent.com. It's an award-winning branding, communications design, digital design. They perform integrated campaigns for the top nonprofits. And Ben has won almost every major North American creative award, as writing published, served on boards, started his own agency, which he talked about, which has fast grown into Canada's premier full service agency for nonprofit organizations. And Ben, I'm excited to have you. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you, Jeremy. Pleasure to be here.
Just talk for a second about what you do at For Good Intent. And we have a bunch of cool topics that we've brainstormed from. This is going to be especially relevant because we'll talk about building a leadership team, the path to empower staff, and also the story of when you get $1 million client and is that good or bad? But talk about For Good Intent and what you do.
Absolutely. So For Good Intent is a creative communications agency that only works with nonprofit organizations. We work across Canada from coast to coast, helping clients solve problems. So the nonprofit world is a little different from your traditional agency working with businesses and corporations in terms of the problems that they bring to us and how we can help them solve them. And so the types of work that we do can range from helping them with their strategic planning, right through to graphic design, advertising campaigns, website development, and branding projects, and everything else in between. We specialize in healthcare, public health, and community services, but work in a wide range of nonprofit sectors as well.
I think, Ben, within the agency world, churn and keeping clients is top of mind for a lot of agencies. I'd love for you to talk about this one, which is, I think, is a perfect example, which is that if you're looking, by the way, if you're listening to the audio, there is a video portion we can see we're at the For Good Intent, and you can see the intent help the Canadian Partnership Against Cancer. Talk about what you did with them, because that, I think, highlights a lot of, how do you evolve with a company and continue to serve them over years?
Yeah, a very interesting story on this one. We participated in a public procurement process back in 2014, so 10 years ago now, to become one of their vendors of record so that we could provide graphic design services to them specifically at that time. And I have to say, back then when we were still relatively new as Intent, when we refocused on nonprofits, this one was a lofty goal, working with Canada's steward for cancer control across the country is a big client. We're very fortunate in that we were selected as one of their agencies and quickly became their go-to agency for their large strategic reports. So what you can see on the screen here for those that are watching is their 10-year strategy, which we worked on in 2019. But between 2014 and 2024, the type of work that we call them CPAC or the partnership brings to us are these large mission critical reports that they are responsible to Health Canada, as well as the various cancer agencies across the country for producing. So they can be a compendium of various programs and activities that the organization is putting together, or they can be about a specific program, say tobacco cessation, HPV prevention. And they come to us because they know that they can depend upon us. They know that we're specialists, that our design department does this work and has done this work for many, many years. And we've been able to, over the years, actually create a brand for the partnership through the application of the work, which is quite interesting. We've never been hired to do their brand guidelines or develop their brand, but through the consistent application of high quality work, we've actually created their brand language, which now they use across all of their digital and in-print properties. So an interesting evolution of the relationship that was reinforced not through fancy dinners or corporate gifts, but through the consistent application of excellent work. And now we are their go-to group for whenever they have a large, important reporting project.
Talk about the services. How has your services evolved from when you first started till now?
Very much. Our services evolved very much. So when we started out, first of all, we started out not doing nonprofit. We started out as a generalist graphic design studio. So two evolutions. One, we've evolved to specialize in nonprofit communications. And two, we've broadened to become a full service communications agency. So going from just graphic design projects to communications projects of all scopes and definitions. And that is the biggest change. So our clients come to us when they have a large scope of work with multiple components and give it to us to manage from the beginning to the end. The offshoot of that, which has been very interesting, specifically for my work on the business, is the amount of strategic work that we're now asked to do. So I am now brought in almost as a consultant by nonprofits to help them work on operational or communications strategic challenges, which is a radical change from laying out a brochure like we did in 2013.
How do you come to, because I'm sure the first time you got that request, I'm wondering how you decide to package that service, which is that strategic work, because I get, okay, we're going to, produce this website, we're going to produce this design, we're going to do this for you. And I'm sure someone's like, Ben, we just want you to consult.
Yeah.
How did you decide to package that service, which essentially is you in that respect? And I'm wondering if you turned it down at all, or you just like went full force with it?
As with anything in my life, it's not a clear-cut answer. So what I've found in this particular iteration is that we were already doing a lot of these strategic consulting activities as a part of our discovery work on a brand or a campaign. And when a client came to us and said, we need some help on some strategy work, and these are the challenges we're facing, I sat down and thought about the challenges and thought, well, we're already deploying some of these activities and exercises. Why not do it in isolation as opposed to part of the project process? So that's part one. And it sort of evolved organically to the point where I think this is going to be the year of strategic consultation for me specifically. I would say hopefully without coming across as hubristic, I was always related in that. So I trained as a graphic designer in London, England at one of their esteemed graphic design schools, but I was always more interested in the words than the visuals. I got a far better mark on my dissertation than I did on my portfolio. And so I think it was a natural evolution that I'm interested in communicating, I'm interested in ideas, and I'm interested in people far more than just design aesthetics. So I think it was a natural evolution for myself, something I was interested in, something I was able to do, and something the clients required.
What are some of the important questions you ask in the beginning of that relationship to start the strategy, right? People come to you like, what do we do? Where do we go? I'm sure you have, some exploratory conversations.
I absolutely do. And I actually I always start with the journalistic model, the who, what, where, why, when, and how. And so I sort of apply those questions to the challenge. And I always start with why. Why are we doing this? What are you hoping to achieve? What are the problems that you are finding now? And then what's really important is the who. So who are we talking to? Who is this for? What do they care about? Where are they? How can we reach them? So I'm very inquisitive in that way. That's just a conversation, Jeremy. But then once the conversation happens and we facilitate some of the answers, then we move into actual specific exercises that I walk people through to have them come up with a lot of their own answers, or at least generate some really good discussions around the challenges and how we can solve them.
We'll talk about the specifically the Women's College Hospital Foundation and how that went as far as the exploratory process goes. Because you took them through this process, and so how did it work with the Women's College Hospital Foundation?
That work it might be the work that I'm most proud of. And I must insist that it be clear that my team did the bulk of this work. This does not fall on Ben's shoulders. This was it was certainly a team effort, and many creative and talented people were involved in that work. With that one specifically, it is a client that is doing something that is remarkable. They are changing the way that healthcare is considered, designed, and executed in Canada, and nobody else is doing it like they do. And so the challenge was aligning all of the various stakeholders they have. So comms team, doctors themselves, hospital administration, because you have to remember that in Canada, hospitals and foundations are two separate entities. The foundation raises money for the hospital. The hospital is publicly funded in Canada for operating expenses, but not capital expenses. So the foundation has to raise money for investments in equipment, new programs, research studies, etc. This client also has a research institute that we had to interface with. So understanding all of these different facets, all of the different programs, and bringing them back to this central idea of we see things differently was the challenge. And the way that I did that, the way that I designed that process was to go right to the horse's mouth and talk to the leaders of the specific activities and programs themselves to understand how each one of them sees things differently and how we can pull the threads together into one unified message. So you can see on your screen here, you have someone like this, Dr. Rashid, who runs their refugee health clinic. Above, there was Dr. Lofters, who runs the Black Women's Health and Women's Cancer Centers. So completely different fields, but trying to find those threads that I can pull together to tell a coherent story was the challenge with this particular project. And making it authentic and making it real. So it's not just the same old healthcare messaging of basically give us money because we're helping people. It was trying to create that narrative. And then once we have the narrative, once we knew the strategy of the campaign going forward, how do we express that in a way that's visually striking, that is going to stand out? And in Toronto, nobody's ever seen 40-foot wide, massive pink walls on the subway before. It was very, very impactful. You can see there. And again, we had to pull in the right photographer, the right media buying company. It was really a combined effort to create this remarkable campaign. And I should say, Women's College Hospital Foundation has never done a campaign of this nature before. They've never done transit advertising. This is another level for them, and they've seen tremendous results from the campaign. So it was a lot of different work that was involved, but I would say that the most important work that was done was listening to the subject matter experts and translating what they were telling us into the campaign to achieve the objective of educating the public about what makes Women's College Hospital so special.
Yeah. It sounds like, you really are doing a lot of listening. You're interviewing the stakeholders and you're figuring out that common thread and then kind of tying that to a compelling design, right? And obviously this pops out, right? I mean, if you see again, if you're listening to the audio, you could see it's just a striking pink background with the kind of the greenish over the eyes and then the highlighted green throughout. So it really seems to highlight and stick out the key pieces to this. So it's really cool. And in your process, the who, what, where, when, why, how, I'm wondering, at one point you were a generalist agency and you
Yes.
applied that to yourself, right? As far as who do we go after? So at what point do you decide and how did you go about it to specialize? Because I'm sure you could have gone down a couple different paths.
Yes, and we had those paths mapped. So we started in 2009 as a generalist agency called Hagon Design Inc. when I was a little bit more big on myself than I am today, using my last name. And we went really well, and that's where maybe in a little bit we can get into the $1 million story. And after a few years of doing great work and winning awards and growing the team, we knew something was off. We knew that this, aiming for every target and not specializing and not being experts was a problem. And some of the clients that we were picking up, we didn't necessarily align with in terms of our core values. So we actually employed a consultant to lead us through a process. And again, I would highly encourage folks who are starting out with agencies to work with these different specialists, because part of my strategic consulting work now comes from that consultant that I learned from when he deployed his process upon us. And after a long process where he spoke to all of our team, he spoke to some of our clients, he gave us a choice. He said, you can become Canada's nonprofit company agency, or you can become Canada's construction marketing agency. And he said, I'm not telling you which one is correct, but you guys have to pick.
Construction marketing.
Construction marketing, because we did a lot of work with large construction companies. So, one very lucrative, and then the other very emotionally rewarding. And we went back to the team, and my partner and I, we sat down and reviewed the options, and it was unanimous. Everybody wanted to do the nonprofit thing. And so we started off with the two companies, with the two brands. We had Hagon Design Inc. and we had Intent running, and that was fall 2013. And we gave it a year, and we said, what we're going to do is we're going to promote the Dickens out of Intent, and we're just going to let Hagon Design run and see how it goes. And within a year, Intent had swallowed up all of the business. And that was a real testament to the idea that what you put out, you get back. We stopped putting out about Hagon Design Inc. and we didn't get anything back. Whereas Intent, we promoted it hard, and all of a sudden we're picking up all of these fascinating nonprofit clients.
Yeah, no, I love it. You put it to the test. You split tested it.
That's right.
So the $1 million client, some people would think amazing, right?
Mm-hmm.
But talk about what happened.
So it is amazing at the time. So what happened was I started the business and had a few clients. I don't know if you guys remember BlackBerry. They were my first client back in 2009.
I held on to my BlackBerry as long as they made them. I loved them. And there's a I don't know if it's not really a documentary, but there's a movie out there where
there is. I haven't seen it.
I have to watch it, but it's kind of the inception and what happened.
So at the time, I lived in that town where BlackBerry was from. So that's where the business started. They encouraged me to go on my own. I did, picked up another couple of clients. And within about a year, I think it was slightly under a year, a client from many years before that I worked with actually at my first ever job in Canada, came knocking. And she said, Ben, I really enjoyed our work together all those years ago. My law firm is rebranding and we want you to do it. And that came with a lot of work, not just the branding, but there was so many projects. So that within 12 months, we had billed $1 million Canadian on that account. And we'd gone from myself, my partner, and one junior designer to a team of 9. And so this is where things get interesting. So what happened was we did a beautiful job. We really did a very, very nice job. We learned a lot on the way, and we grew our team to service that client. The problem with $1 million client is when the client is done. So today, our clients generally are long-term clients, and it's not just one and done project. Back then, we were more of a transactional company. We were project-based. And eventually, we'd done all the work, and then the in-house team took over. So now, the work is done, and I'm looking around, and I've got 8 mouths to feed. And that's the problem with $1 million client. Some agency folks call it the gorilla client. There is an actual term for it, and that term is that when you have a gorilla client, if you let them, they will chase off all of the other clients, like a gorilla
Right. Yeah.
on their territory, which is fine until the gorilla decides they've had enough of you and they leave. So that's what happened to us. And it wasn't because we didn't do good work. It wasn't because we didn't have a good relationship. The work was just done. And so then what happens when you're a fledgling agency owner is you look around, you've got all these mouths to feed, and you think, how the hell am I going to do this? So you have to go absolutely bananas trying to find new clients and fill in the gap of all that revenue. And we kind of stumbled along for a while, and we found some insurance companies, and we did some construction stuff, but it was too big, and so people lose their jobs. And now I'm 15 years in. That does happen. People do lose their jobs. That's just the way of the agency world. But back then it was devastating, and not being able to keep those folks, I saw as a personal failure. And it wasn't necessarily that. I think it was just a stage of evolution of business ownership. So I do caution folks, especially when they're starting early on and they don't have their systems and their processes in place, to be very careful when it comes to landing one of these very large clients. And my recommendation today would be to bring on contract workers. So you hire folks for a specific duration of time, if you can find them, which depends on the economy, if you can find them to service that requirement. And then hopefully things continue and you can hire them on permanently. But committing to folks and then the work dries up is a factor of agency life, but it's an unpleasant factor.
Yeah, but that's what I was going to ask, is what you would do differently today. And it sounds like one of those things is would not have brought everyone on permanently. You would have looked for some high quality contractors to fill that gap. Is there anything else that you would do differently?
I think my point about systems and processes is very important. So today, if we landed $1 million client on the spot, we have the systems and processes in place where that one wouldn't become a gorilla client, and two, we just wouldn't suffer from those same issues. We would either use contract employees. The day that we landed the $1 million client, the next day I'm starting to think about landing more clients, because it takes time. You can't just the day as an agency owner that you land some big work and you're feeling overloaded is the day when you have to promote your business even harder, knowing that the sales cycle can take 6 months, it can take a year, it can take 18 months before a project comes in. You cannot take your foot off the gas. And so we have systems and processes in place for that now, so that wouldn't happen. And then in terms of infrastructure, absolutely. You have to hire based upon your vision, not based upon your capacity. If you want to grow your company and you have specific roles that you want to hire for that you think will be good for your team long term, that's one thing. Bringing bodies into service a client is a completely different thing. And so that only comes with business ownership maturity. You don't know that right off the bat, but that's what I would do differently today.
Yeah, so it sounds like having a streamlined onboarding with SOPs, it doesn't absorb as much resources if you get a bigger client. I'm curious, your tech stack in general. We're talking about SOPs. What do you use to manage different projects, whether it's a CRM or project management tool or SOPs? I want to give a shout out to Adi Clevitt. I had her on the podcast. That's all she does, by the way. She basically goes into companies and helps them create SOPs. And so we geeked out on our favorite software productivity tools and how she thinks about streamlining SOPs. Because like you said, it's kind of the non-sexy things that makes things work. What's your tech stack look like?
Yeah, so it probably like many agencies is rather chaotic, but we do have a lot of technology tools we use. For our sales pipeline. We use a tool called Begin by Zoho. It's a free tool up to a certain level, and then you can pay. It's just a very great visual sales pipeline slash basic CRM, which is very helpful for tracking opportunities and for understanding where things come in and attributing them to salespeople, etc. For project management, we use Asana, which is a very commonly used tool, which helps us understand what's happening when, what resources we require, and just ensures that everybody stays on the same page. And then currently, our master sort of project system is through Dropbox for Business, though we are actually investigating different alternatives this year due to some of Dropbox's changes that aren't really working for our agency, and I'm sure won't work for many others as well. So we're looking at some other tools there that increase collaboration for people outside of our organization, because the tool we currently use can be kind of challenging for people outside of our ecosystem.
Is it like sharing resources, or what do you use Dropbox for typically?
We use it as a file server.
Got it.
Yeah, but
Okay.
we use collaboration tools, but they're changing those this year, which is a shame.
I was just
So,
thinking those type of tools are so sticky because I've had my Dropbox account forever, and I'm like, I don't want to get rid of it because I still have stuff on it, although I use other tools as well. So
yeah,
they have that
they
model down.
they are
What?
sticky. They're
Yeah.
very sticky. Yeah, but there's folks out there that can help you with migration and whatnot.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I still have mine. I'll probably pay for it forever. But I want to talk about the team, right? So you mentioned with some of these projects, it wasn't me, it was the
Mhm.
team. And talk about a little bit about hiring
Mhm.
and what are some of the things you think about when you're building a great team?
Yeah. Um, so 15 years of hiring and unfortunately sometimes letting people go, you learn a lot. You do learn a lot. And I am sometimes to my detriment a bit of a bleeding heart, which I don't recommend when it comes to business ownership, because you have to be a little colder than my natural inclination. But you do have to, as with anything in business, you have to use data to inform your decisions. So whether it's time to hire or it's time to restructure the team, you have to look at the data. It's not your love life. You're not making emotional decisions. And unfortunately, many folks in the agency world, they're creative people, they're emotional people, they're impulsive people, and that has all helped them in their career as a producer. But as soon as you step into that ownership and entrepreneur realm, it's a completely different skills requirement. And that, I think, is where a lot of agency folks trip up. They're not able to bridge the gap. And it took me a long time to move over my thinking and my natural inclinations to be data driven, to make decisions based upon logic and reason and rationale and not emotion. And so when it comes to hiring, I look at what the company needs, first of all. So I need to understand where our gaps are and where I see opportunities to add value to our client relationships before I bring in a specific role. Then once I've decided on what that role looks like and what we require, I use various methods to find folks. But my number one recommendation for any agency owner is always hire based upon character, not skills. Skills can be taught, character cannot really be taught. You can help guide and mentor folks to think in a certain way, but if they're not a good, decent, diligent person, you can't train that. And I get into arguments with other agency owners about this all the time, and I've always said you can teach a chimp to use a Mac, but you can. It's so easy to teach software. It's free now. The YouTube, you can do anything on YouTube. And we do invest in our team and send them to college and do certifications and whatnot. $300 to go to college is nothing, but you have someone that comes in that doesn't have the right motivations, the right incentivization, the right character, and it can be very detrimental to your team and your business. So hiring for character, as hard as that is the number one. It's the only thing I hire on. I only hire. They have to be at a certain level skill wise, but that level doesn't have to be that high, but they have to be very high in terms of their integrity, in terms of their decision making, in terms of their personality. That's what it's all about, right? The word company simply means a collection of people. That's what it means. And so you have to have the right collection of people.
And how do you assess character in the hiring process? Sometimes it's hard to judge or get to know people. So what do you do?
It is very hard, and especially in these days with remote, because so much of this work is now done via video. My company is remote. We don't have offices. We don't have you don't have to go to work every day. Most people do it from home. And sometimes I'll hire someone. I won't even meet them in person for the first 6 months that they work for me. So it is challenging. I think it's old school. You have to meet with them. You have to look at their work history. I am very interested in people's non-agency sector work history. So if anybody's worked in the service industry, I'm very interested in them. I want to look for volunteer experience. I want to look at their interests outside of work. Multiple interviews is helpful, though not too many because that can get too much. And I actually have found that the references process is actually counterproductive. Everybody should know that when people give references, they're sending you to their 3 friendliest contacts that they've ever met in their career, and they're briefing them to tell you that they're the most amazing people ever. And I've actually had a couple of instances where I got the most glowing references, and the person was not the right character for our organization. And so fast forward, let's say you hire somebody and you have suspicions about their fit with your company culture and their alignment with your core values. My number one recommendation to any business owner is fire fast. Hire slow, fire fast. Do not wait. As a business owner, you know, even if you're a bleeding heart like me and you let things go too long, you know if they're not right, get rid of them. In Canada, we have very strict labor laws. You can't just fire people on the spot without going through specific processes. So I think some states it might be a little different, but here we have very specific hiring laws. So for our company, we have a probationary period of 3 months. We like to try and clear up any missteps within those 90 days and make sure that, if it's not a good fit, and most of the time it is, I would say 90% of the time we do a good job of bringing the right people in. But as a business owner, don't wait. Don't think that they're going to wake up tomorrow and be a different person. I can tell you from experience, they are not going to be. They are who they are, and sometimes it's not a character issue. Sometimes they're just not right for the role. Sometimes they're not right for the company culture. Do everyone a favor and make a decision and let them get on to find the job that is right for them, and you can find the person that's right for the job. Nobody benefits when you dilly-dally around getting rid of folks.
I don't want to throw anyone under the bus or you to disclose any private information, but I'm curious for some examples, maybe some red flags that you've seen in your experience of, without releasing someone's identity, but what are some of the red flags you've seen? Because I'm sure it starts off maybe not so obvious, and then it becomes more because obviously you hired the person. So it wasn't obvious in the beginning. So what are some red flags that you've seen or people should watch out for?
I would say if you're truly analytical, it is obvious from the beginning. The people who I'm thinking of specifically that weren't right, either they were a bad employee or they just weren't right. They were a good employee, but they just weren't right. I knew very quickly. You just get a feeling for whether they're a good fit with your culture and whether they are going to apply themselves properly to your mission. Red flags, like if I think about a couple of the folks, it's a little tricky, I have to say, without disclosing detailed information, but work application. So if in the first week they are not effervescent with excitement for the work, that's a real red flag. If folks come in and they're a little lackadaisical right from the get-go, if you're not ready,
not going to get any better.
The first week, it's not going to get any better. And it's not that you're expecting people to come in and hit the ground running and just be able to do their job in the first hour, but the excitement and application is clear. And as somebody that's been in business for quite a while now, and I'm sure other folks in my shoes will say the same, you can tell when people are faking. You can tell when enthusiasm is faked, like usually because it's too much, it's over the top. But I love it when someone comes in and they pay attention and they listen and they ask questions and they set clear expectations. Those are the folks you want. The people who kind of hide, the people that are overly bubbly in meetings and overly complimentary. You got to watch those folks. And then you have the people that just don't even bother from day one. Though you come across those once in a while too. I did have an employee that just didn't show up on their second day. That was the biggest red flag. They just didn't show up. They didn't come back. We parted ways on day.
Not a good first impression or second impression.
The pandemic did strange things to the HR market. There was no one available. And so you ended up, if you were hiring during that time, you ended up sort of kind of taking what you could get. And that was a very negative experience.
So on the positive front, Ben, let's talk about building leaders. Okay.
Yeah.
So what are some of the things, I know that's something you're thinking about, actually we're thinking about, is building leaders within. What are some of the ways that you have found successful to build leadership, build leaders within so they can, escalate to a leadership position?
Well, I haven't been yet. This is my focus for this year. I've never really been able to crack this nut specifically. I've had folks get close, but I would say specifically from the creative agency world, it's almost similar to the point I made before about folks who are really good at being a creative having to shift their mindset so dramatically when they become an entrepreneur or a leader. The same thing is true within agencies. So within the agency infrastructure itself, the very, very talented people tend to rise up through the ranks. And I understand that. And I'm not saying they shouldn't, but that doesn't necessarily equate to leadership. That can equate to a director. You can if you're an amazing designer and you've worked for 15 years and you've learned so much about all the different facets of work, you can be a great manager or director of younger designers. That doesn't make you a company leader. They're two different skill sets. And so what I've been doing a lot of is I've been doing a lot of reading. I've been doing a lot of learning on this topic from folks like John C. Maxwell and others, and trying to understand this thing called leadership in isolation, away from my business, away from my sector. What does leadership look like on a human level? And so now I'm looking for those qualities in the people who work for my company. The challenge is you may demonstrate those qualities and not be the most senior people. And how do you manage that? And that's something for me to be working on this year. But if you don't do it, Jeremy, your company won't grow. It's impossible. That's what I've learned over 15 years as the leader. And yes, I have a partner who's a silent partner. There is John C. Maxwell calls it the lid. And so there's a lid that you will hit as one person. And your business won't get any bigger. And I have a dollar figure in my mind. I know what that number is. You cannot go above, I cannot go above it. I have a capacity. So in order to increase that, whether it's you wanting to increase the dollars or whether you're just wanting to increase the quality of your offering or all of the above, you need support in leadership. And even at a small company, we're only 11 people, but I need support in terms of leadership. So I am looking for very specific qualities. I am looking for intelligence. I certainly want a high degree of intelligence. I am looking for folks that have no issue delivering difficult words and statements and decisions, that seem to not worry about delivering the hard news, which in general doesn't jive with creative personalities. Creative people do not like that. I'm looking for folks that are interested, that read, that are well-rounded and can inspire. And also the last point that I'm looking for is people most closely aligned to our company's core values. You need your leadership to align on values. Otherwise, it's going to get real messy real quick.
I mean, some of the first steps to, it's a long journey, right, to formulate a leadership team, but some of the first steps is just giving someone a path to upward trajectory and empowering them. So what are some of the things, and you've done this throughout the company too, that you've done to empower staff and also give them a path, even if it's not maybe to leadership, but to managing people or whatever it is?
Yeah, I think that that is one of the things that is most important to me as a leader is empowering my people, whether, like you say, whether they're going to empower to grow into a leadership role or not. But empowering folks to feel confident in their work, to feel empowered to make decisions, feel empowered to make mistakes, and to know what to do when they're overwhelmed. And I think that it really comes back, for me anyway, at my business, it comes back to treating people with decency, supporting them when they need support, and getting the hell out of the way the rest of the time. There's a real problem in our world of micromanagement, of managers who are, I'm gonna be frank, they're shitty managers. They're not managers, they're control freaks. Those are two different things. And so what I find is, and I found it as a worker, as somebody before I had a business, is the more my immediate supervisor tried to control me, the less interested in progress I was, the more interested in looking for new jobs I was. And so my mandate at Intent, our manifesto is to improve lives. And the first lives that we improve are the people that work at Intent. So everything I do is focused on trying to improve the lives of my team. And my hope is that by doing that, they will then focus on improving the lives of their clients. And then our hope is by doing that, the people who receive our work, the audiences, the community members, the patients, their lives will be improved because they have clearer information, they have more beautiful things to look at, the websites work properly, and all along the way. So for me, it's really about treating people fairly, properly, and giving them a path to grow.
Is there a specific meeting cadence, whether it's you meeting with, people on the team or certain managers meeting with the staff? What kind of meeting cadence or types of meetings do you have within the company?
We meet a lot. We do meet a lot. We do find that you can get a lot done in 5 or 10 minute chat rather than endless email threads. We do that. I'm a little old school. I want an agenda for every meeting. No agenda, no Ben. That's the rule. If you don't give me an agenda or you don't allow me to set one, then I don't come. There is a crisis in the working world of no agendas for meetings. And so what ends up happening at most meetings is everybody shows up and they chat for 5 or 10 minutes about their dog or whatever. And I find that most people don't even give a damn about their dog. It's just filling air. And so people kind of scratch around for commonalities that you can kill some time with. And then the conversation typically is rambling and directionless, and people have their sound bites that they want to get out, and it might come out, but who really knows? So for me, an agenda is essential, even for internal meetings. And then from there, you go through the agenda.
I just want to point that out I just want to emphasize that for a second, Ben, because that's a gem right there. Just that alone, would save so much time, energy, and focus, and just having whatever that meeting is, there has to be an agenda ahead of time.
Has to be an agenda.
And the person thinks through that. It makes them think through what they want to talk about and actually makes it more fruitful. So thanks. I just want to emphasize that. Yeah, thank you.
And not only do we have an agenda, we send out enough time that people can add input into said agenda. So if it's not checking the boxes, then tell us and we'll adjust it in advance of the meeting. And then once you get into the meeting, in terms of cadence, I'm very much like we are now. I'm very straightforward. I'm very honest. I don't put on any business BS. It's just, we're just talking about what we're trying to get done here and how we're going to get it done. And so I think that earnestness comes through quite clearly. I don't play games. I don't play corporate nonsense. I'm not interested in any of that. I find it utterly boring and pointless. It can get me in trouble, I'm going to have to say, when you run up against large institutions, large hospitals, governments, That's their world. It's very guarded. I'm not like that. I don't see the point now. I don't have enough years left of work to waste with nonsense. So I'm very clear. I'm very personable, I think, quite casual, but it's structured casual. It follows an agenda. There are objectives for every meeting. What are we trying to achieve? And then at the end of the meeting, those minutes are typed up and circulated for review. We are very formal around documentation and process, and we are very casual in the way that we speak, and we find that's a nice mix.
So Ben, I have one last question. First of all, thanks for sharing your journey, your stories and lessons with us. And everyone should check out forgoodintent.com to learn more. You saw the website and we shared it. Last question is resources. It could be on leadership, it could be on management. What are some of your favorite resources? It could be mentors. But what are some of your favorite resources people should check out, whether it's books or people you've learned from?
I have a new resource which is really left field for me, that I have been leaning on a lot. And before I get into them, I do want to state that for me, when I read, when I listen, when I watch, I am not, and I think it's very important in today's day and age, I am not accepting what I'm hearing wholesale. I am picking and choosing the elements that I think are interesting, and I am discarding some of the stuff that seems ridiculous. So that's very important, because I do think we have an issue with people just watching a podcast and saying, I'm going to do all that stuff, right? Joe Rogan said X, so I got to do it. Well, no. You pick what works for you. I have started following a gentleman called Dave Ramsey, who is
Oh, for sure. He's been podcasting for many, many years. Yeah.
He has so much practical business advice, and, politically we're misaligned, culturally we're misaligned, religiously we're misaligned, but he has a lot of business wisdom. You have to cut through some of the, multi-level marketing type style stuff. You have to be careful, but there are some real gems, as he says, from the trenches. So I listen and read his work. My absolute favorite is John C. Maxwell. I mean, he is just a stalwart. You can't go wrong. Again, politically, religiously, not necessarily aligned. I'm agnostic. I'm not a Christian. These people are very into. I mean, I think John C. Maxwell is a faith leader. I think that's his background. But his wisdom on people and leadership are, for my money, they're the best. It's the best stuff out there. So I read those. And then I think that, again, like I mentioned before, being well read is important. It's not just about learning about leadership. If you don't have a subscription to The Atlantic, get one. If you haven't read Michael Pollan, read him. If you don't follow current affairs, start following current affairs. There are too many people in the world that go to work and go home and watch quiz shows. I think that John C. Maxwell says every good leader reads. Every leader is a reader, but not every reader is a leader. You cannot lead if you don't read. It's impossible. And 80% of that could be novels, because there's plenty to learn in novels, but you must read. It's very, very important. So I say a broad range of inputs, and then select your outputs that you want to take out of things. But everyone should start with John C. Maxwell.
Love it. Ben, I want to be the first one to thank you. Everyone check out forgoodintent.com. Check out more episodes of the podcast, and we'll see everyone next time. Thanks, everyone.
What I got, you can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sailing right now. I'm feeling like $100 grand.